fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to Connecticut.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Little Tuesday morning edition, Air Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Air Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. Hope everybody is ready for, listen, I know it's December. We're getting towards the holidays. I suspect we are going to be jam-packed with content basically from now until Christmas. That's just how it is. And today's episode is a pretty good indication, right? So the last time we were actually live on air, it was Sunday night. Lane Kiffin, all that good stuff. Hours after we get off air, Mark Stoops is fired. I did some reaction yesterday. By today, Kentucky has a new head football coach, Will Stein. We'll talk about that. Lane Kiffin, listen, we can move past at this point how he left Ole Miss. I think already you're seeing signs of both why he wanted that job and why that job wanted him. We'll talk a little bit about Ryan Silverfield at Arkansas. Ryan Silverfield, I was not familiar with your game, picking up big recruiting win after big recruiting win. And finally, we will go ahead and wrap with this weird situation in Penn State. Kalani Sitake, I kind of sniffed that one out early. We'll see what happens. It feels more like leverage than anything else, but we'll discuss that. And if they miss on Kalani Sitake, I do not know what Penn State does. Before we get started, a couple quick reminders. One, make sure that you are, by the way, should mention, Luke mentions the ACC SEC Challenge in the chat. No basketball today, but tomorrow morning we will be back because it's a monster slate tonight. UConn at Kansas, Carolina at Kentucky, Duke hosting Florida. So we'll be back tomorrow with plenty of hoops. Today, though, a lot of football. Before we get started, a couple reminders. As I said, make sure you're subscribed. Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. New clips, new videos going up every single day. Darn it, do we appreciate your support and everything you do for this show. Well over 66,000 subscribers. I've said it. The goal, I think we can get to 70,000 subs before the end of the year, before the end of 2025. But we cannot do it without your support, so make sure that you are subscribed. Also, we are available on Apple and Spotify, so wherever you get podcasts, make sure to check us out there as well. If you want to leave a 5-star rating, if you want to leave a review on Apple, that really would help. You know what else would help? If you need tickets, you need to go ahead and figure out what's the best way to get them, where to get them, all that. Well, you need to go to SeatGeek, okay? So SeatGeek is America's #1 ticketing app. You've probably heard a little bit about them. But what I love about SeatGeek is that every ticket is rated 1 through 10. If you got a green dot, that means you go ahead and purchase it. If you got a red dot, means you should probably stay away. But it's that time of year. We got a lot of Indiana fans and BYU fans and Ohio State fans, Alabama fans getting ready for conference championship games, maybe a college football playoff. Maybe your team is playing big basketball games. Maybe you're a Kentucky fan that needs tickets tonight to see Carolina. Well, if you need tickets, all you got to do is download the SeatGeek app. Like I said, every ticket rated 1 through 10. What I really love about SeatGeek, though, surprise, surprise, it's that they take care of listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. So how about this? If you go to SeatGeek.com or the SeatGeek app, if you use promo code Torres, that's promo code TORRES, promo code Torres, it gets you $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek.com. Promo code Torres gets you $20 off your first purchase. By the way, thank you to everybody who has used the promo code so far. By the way, if you sign up with a different email, you can probably use it more than once. You didn't hear that from me. But SeatGeek actually just extended with us through the end of March Madness. So that means that they love what we're doing for the app and for SeatGeek. SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. With that said, oh, buddy. It is it's a busy time of year, right? No more time to waste. Folks, let's go ahead and get to the topic of the day. So topic of the day, listen, you want a good reflection of how fast this coaching carousel world moves, okay? And really how fast college sports in 2025 and in this portal NIL world move. All you got to do is go ahead and look at that screen. Kentucky fans, imagine waking up on Sunday morning, seeing Will Stein in the Kentucky edit and saying, that's my football coach. You would have never pictured it. You would have never imagined it, because this is how quickly this whole thing came together, okay? Sunday, we do our full show at 6 Eastern time. At that point, you're starting to hear rumors and innuendo. Mark Stoops, maybe this is finally the time, but you're really wondering, are they actually going to pull the plug? $39 million buyout. Well, by Sunday night, Mark Stoops was out. And say what you want about Mitch Barnhart. We'll talk about him later. But the AD, who has been so, I think, rightfully criticized, he moved quickly, he moved decisively, and he got the candidate that every Kentucky fan wanted. I think early on, you would have said John Summerall, former Kentucky football player. He ends up at Florida. But Will Stein, Louisville native, Trinity High School, same high school, by the way, as Jeff Brom. That is a story in and of itself. Well, by the end of Monday, Will Stein, offensive coordinator from Oregon, again, originally from Louisville, he is signed on the dotted line as the next Kentucky football head coach. And Kentucky fans celebrate. Kentucky fans rejoice. Kentucky fans, you should be happy. I think, all things considered, the circumstances you were in, the when you even started the process, this was not only about as well as you could do. I think it was even better than I think a lot of people expected. Let's go ahead and dive into this hire. Will Stein, Oregon offensive coordinator until the end of the college football playoff. I think we'll talk about that. But he is now the Kentucky football coach. And like I said, I think you got to be over the moon. Okay. So first of all, it is crazy how quickly all of this came together. Okay. Again, we don't need to redo the timing of it all, but it's wild to me that Arkansas, that LSU, that Auburn, that Florida, they all had months to prepare for this. And we talked about, I did a little bit of an immediate reaction to the firing on Monday morning, but we talked about the fact that, listen, I don't blame anybody. I think there was a thought that, one, you couldn't get Mark Stoops out of the contract. Two, on top of it, that he wasn't going to take any sort of altered buyout, which, by the way, credit to Torres. I've been saying since September, if it got bad enough, he would not, hold the school hostage as far as the buyout is concerned. But I bring it up because, again, 2-3 weeks ago, we're talking about Kentucky being on a 3-game winning streak, back-to-back SEC wins. Mark Stoops is going to stay. And then it falls apart against Vandy. It really falls apart against Louisville, okay? So first of all, credit to Mitch Barnhart. Whatever you think of him, said this is not good enough. This cannot go on. I can't go to my fans over the next 6 to 8 months and try to convince them to be excited for this football program. But then going out and getting Will Stein, listen, I think if you had asked Kentucky fans, like I said, 6 months ago, they would have said John Summerall. I think if you had asked Kentucky football fans 5-6 days ago, or maybe 3 days ago after the Louisville game, I think they all would have said, get us Will Stein, and that's exactly what he does. Now, listen, let's talk about the hire, okay? So we can't say for sure that this guy's going to work, or that guy's going to work, or that guy's going to be a home run. I actually thought virtually every new coach had a good first day yesterday on Monday. But what I will say about Will Stein is he checks a couple boxes. And before we even get into all the positives, I think it's also interesting because I think there was this perception, one, that nobody would want the Kentucky job if it opened, but two, how challenging it is, right? And so I bring it up because Will Stein, yes, he's only 36. Yes, it's his first head coaching job. But if he's going to enter the SEC as a 36-year-old first-time head coach, isn't this the time to do it? Auburn going through a change, Florida going through a change, LSU, Ole Miss, Arkansas, they're all going through changes. And so the league of even 3 to 4 years ago with Nick Saban and Kirby Smart, who is obviously still there, but Brian Kelly, I mean, you think about where the league was to where it is now, the league is still unbelievable, but with so much change, if you're going to be making this hire, this feels like the time to do it. And this feels like the guy you had to have, okay? So first of all, what I love about Will Stein, is the same thing that every Kentucky fan loves about Will Stein, okay? Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? None of us know on any of these hires. The one thing I can tell you, that style of football that you watched the last 14 years with Mark Stoops, a lot of close games, a lot of low scoring, a lot of punts, a lot of field position, I don't think you're going to see that anymore. Okay, so Will Stein comes in a couple years as the Oregon offensive coordinator, and what I think you're going to see is a lot of points in a hurry, a fun offense, innovative, NFL talent all over that offense. I think that more than anything is a reason to be excited. Okay, and this is not to crap on the previous head coach, but it is also like he felt like he could only win one way in the SEC. As I said, low scoring, defense, etc. Not totally all his fault. That's his background. He's a Stoops. We know the Stoops family is defensive minded. He was a defensive backs coach. You go on and on, okay? But what I will say is that you're bringing in an offensive guy who should bring a fun offensive system. And I think the one thing that really stands out to me about Will Stein, too, is the ability to adjust on the fly, right? So listen, offense is always fun to watch, right? And offense is especially fun to watch when everything's clicking, everything's going well, everything's operating on the highest level. What stood out to me, and I forgot to send this tweet to producer Matt, so that one's on me, but Jeff Schwartz, former Oregon offensive lineman who now works in the media, he actually does stuff with Fox Sports Radio. I don't know him very well. We've been on each other's shows, whatever. He put out a tweet basically the other day saying, like, look, this is what's the most impressive thing Kentucky fans about this offense is that this offense all year long, this is the Oregon offense now that I'm talking about, it's been kind of chaotic from an injury standpoint, not chaotic from a coaching standpoint, but from an injury standpoint. So first of all, Will Stein, to his credit, turned Dante Moore into potentially the number one pick in the NFL draft. Remember, Dante Moore a few years ago, let's never forget this, was, yes, a five-star prospect, but he goes to UCLA. It does not work out. And I think there's a lot of us, myself included, that kind of sat there and said, like, maybe this guy's just not as good as we think. Goes to Oregon, sits out. Now Will Stein has him as a Heisman Trophy contender. But I think what is so interesting about it is this, doing it with a lot of different pieces in and out of the lineup. Evan Stewart, best receiver on that roster coming into the year, lost during the summer to a knee injury. DeCorian Moore, number one wide receiver in high school football, was awesome early, been injured. He's had injuries on the O-line. He's had injuries in the running back room. And they keep putting up points, and they keep winning, and they keep finding a way. And that's what has to have you excited if you're a Kentucky fan. Again, it's one thing if the offense operates at the highest level. What do you have? Injuries, you have whatever, and you're still continuing to produce. That gets you excited. The other thing that I do think does matter, he's a Kentucky guy, okay? And I think sometimes we do overrate fit and, where a guy is from and all of that. But I do think we've gotten proof time and time again that it does help, right? On the negative side, Brian Kelly just never fit at LSU. And I'm just using him as an example, right? Kalani Sitake, we'll talk about it in a second. Does he really make sense for Penn State? I don't know. But I bring it up because I do think there is something unique to Will Stein being not only a Kentucky native, but a Kentucky fan. As a matter of fact, producer Matt, pop up what Will Stein had to say when he was named the head coach. Quote, "I'm honored and excited to become the next head coach at Kentucky. Growing up in Kentucky and sitting in the stands at UK games as a kid, I could only dream of one day leading the Wildcats. This is truly a dream come true." So listen, is it everything? No. If he was a Kentucky fan and a Kentucky, a former Kentucky season ticket holder from Louisville who had the 109th ranked offense at Wyoming, do I think he's the right candidate? No. But I do think it helps. I do think it helps because being a Kentucky fan, one, you're just going to naturally know a lot of people in the area. And I do think this is a little inside baseball, but really over the last year, Louisville has kind of taken over the local recruiting. Vince Morrow, who we've had on the show, former right-hand man of Mark Stoops, is now at Louisville. So you needed somebody that knew the area. And I'm not saying you have to only recruit Kentucky or whatever. I'm just saying having a guy who knows the area helps. But having a guy who knows the area, who knows what it takes to win, who wants to be there. I think that's another thing, right? I know we're at a weird time in Kentucky basketball with Mark Pope and the struggles that he's having right now, but I do think there's something to Kentucky former player wants to be there, dream job, wants to figure out a way to make it work. And I think it's going to be the same with Will Stein. And I think, by the way, there's a good example locally, really two of them, of what happens when you get not only the right coach, but the right coach for that area and that understands a school and an area. Look at what's happening at Vanderbilt right now with Clark Lee. Clark Lee, Vandy alum, understood what it took to build a program at that school and doesn't want to leave. He wants to be at Vandy. He wants to build a title contender at Vandy, and we'll find out if he has the blueprint big picture. But short term, it sure does feel like he has the blueprint. So that's exciting. You know, even Jeff Brom from Louisville gets the area. So that to me matters. Now, I think the big questions start to become what's next. By the way, let me sidetrack for half a second here, because I will say this. Speaking of Kentucky, I'm actually going to be at Mint Kentucky Downs next week in Franklin, Kentucky at the Circa Sportsbook. We'll get back to Will Stein in a second, but it's on my mind, and I'm going to just forget if I don't mention it. But listen, as you get ready for Kentucky basketball, as you get ready for this new era of Kentucky football, you need a place to watch all these games, right? Well, I've told you, Circa Sportsbook has officially been put in place at Mint Kentucky Downs in Franklin, Kentucky, okay? So Circa Sportsbook, biggest sportsbook in the world out in Vegas, they now run the sportsbook at the Mint. And what I love about Circa is that they are customer-friendly, sports-friendly, all the big games, everywhere you go. And if you don't want to live in a world where you need to download a million apps, SEC +++, triangle, exclamation point to watch whatever, all you got to do is go to Circa Sportsbook. They have opened up a new one in Mint Kentucky Downs in Franklin, Kentucky at the Mint. I'm actually going to be there next week. I got to go up to Nashville next weekend, so I'm going to pop in, maybe do a show there next week. But if you live in Kentucky, check it out. Mint Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky. By the way, as we get closer to March Madness, we'll do some shows, invite everybody out there. But check it out yourself, Mint Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky. And oh, by the way, you want to let them know that Torres sent you. Tag Circa Sports, tag Aaron_Torres. All right, so let's get back to Will Stein. I had to get that off my chest because I'm just fired up to be there next week on my way to Nashville. So, Will Stein, I think the big questions to me become what's next, okay? And I think the thing that is actually most intriguing to me is that this is one of the rare times in frankly, the last 15 years since Mark Stoops has been the head coach of Kentucky, that Will Stein is walking into a situation that's pretty good at the quarterback spot, right? Remember last week when Mark Stoops was saying, I'm a Kentuckian, I belong here, I should be here? And then he kind of mentioned in passing, oh yeah, Cutter Boley already told me he's going to be back next year. Well, I just bring it up because when I look at Mark Stoops saying that, what it said to me was that was Mark Stoops' last gasp of, yeah, we just got crushed by Vandy, but I got the quarterback figured out, I'm coming back. That doesn't happen, but I think that's what's going to be interesting with Will Stein. I think there's a few things. One, does he keep Cutter Boley? I think he should. I don't know what he'll do. I don't know if he has something in his back pocket. And the one thing I will say, I think every coach should be allowed to run the program from scratch the way that they want. This isn't 1967 anymore. It's not 1992. You shouldn't have to retain players that either don't want to be there or that you don't think fit. But I do think it's interesting. For the first time in a long time, you actually might have the right quarterback in place, and you're now bringing in an offensive coach. I think what's also interesting, and this part fascinates me, are there some of those guys on that Oregon roster that are really, really, really good, but might not be the perfect fit at Oregon at this time? And could they join Will Stein in the SEC? You know, I said this when we did the quick reaction yesterday to Mark Stoops being fired, but I said, like, look, here's the bottom line, is that when I looked at the candidates, I said it should either be Will Stein or Brian Hartline. And the one thing I did say with Brian Hartline, it had been pretty insinuated through back channels that Brian Hartline, early on, he was a candidate at Penn State. He may still be. But I bring it up. And by the way, by the time you watch this, Brian Hartline might be the head coach at Penn State for all we know. Okay. But I bring it up because when we were talking Brian Hartline yesterday, I said, Brian Hartline kind of insinuated and has kind of, I've been told, insinuated behind the scenes that if you hire me, some of those guys at Ohio State that aren't seeing the field right now, they might have a place for us at Penn State. And I referenced, Tavian St. Clair, who's the backup quarterback at Ohio State, former 5-star. Well, I only bring it up because I'm curious with Will Stein. I'm not going to start naming names. I'm not going to start putting stuff out there. But are there really good players, 4-star guys, 5-star guys that aren't seeing the field that maybe could see the field at Kentucky? And so I think you have to be excited. I can't wait to hear what his game plan is. The other thing, and I mentioned this yesterday as well, coming from the Dan Lanning tree, I think is really important, okay? And I said this the other day. Again, Justin Hopkins covers Oregon. I remember him telling me this years ago, about 3 years ago. He said, I covered Mario Cristobal when Mario Cristobal was here at Oregon, and I thought I had never seen a recruiting machine like it. He said, then I saw Dan Lanning go to work, and it's even a completely different level from that. He said, Dan Lanning has a plan for high school seniors, for high school juniors, for high school sophomores, for fifth-year transfers, for sit-out transfers, for transfers that are going to take 2 or 3 years to develop, for JUCOs, for grad. He has a plan for everything and a backup plan to a backup plan to a backup plan. And so to me, that's the other thing that has to have you really excited if you're a Kentucky fan. Coming from that Dan Lanning coaching tree, ultimately it's really the Nick Saban coaching tree, but Will Stein never coached under Nick Saban that I'm aware of. But I just bring it up because recruiting is the lifeblood, and there's no, hey, maybe that, no. When you work for Dan Lanning, you recruit 365 days a year, and I can't wait to see the type of talent that Will Stein brings in. Still curious to see ultimately what it all looks like. Still curious to see, by the way, what the coaching staff looks like. I know there's been a big push to modernize kind of that front office, behind-the-scenes stuff at Kentucky, and I think he does it. So I think there's a lot of reason to be excited about Will Stein. By the way, make sure you're following our Torres on UK account, Torres on UK, for all of your late-breaking news. And by the way, as Kentucky lands transfers, high school players, staffing stuff, just make sure to be plugged into that page. 2 quick thoughts as we close on Will Stein. Then I want to get to Lane Kiffin. I want to get to Ryan Silverfield. Really, the 2 thoughts are combined, okay? There are 2 people that I do think we also, as we transition out of the Mark Stoops era into the Will Stein era, I do think there are 2 people that we have to give credit to, okay? One is Mark Stoops himself, okay? And I have been very critical of Mark Stoops over the last couple months. I think it's justified. I think it was proven with a second straight losing season. But today is not the day to crap on Mark Stoops, okay? Today is the day, I think, if you're a Kentucky fan, appreciate Mark Stoops. Not only the 14 years, 8 straight bowl games, but we talked about it all year. He had a buyout that was $39 million owed in totality within 60 days of when he was fired. Now, to my credit, I said all year, if things get bad enough and he's clearly not wanted back, I thought he would always renegotiate, but he didn't have to renegotiate. He could have said, pay me every last dollar within 60 days or kick rocks. I ain't picking up my phone. My lawyer ain't picking up my phone. I'm waiting for that big fat Publishers Clearinghouse check. Okay, give me that check with $39 million on it, whatever. But I give him credit because he didn't do that. And he actually did the opposite. It worked out well for him. Now, I'm not going to say, he took no buyout and he's a hero and whatever. But at the same time, he changed the buyout structure so it's not all owed within 60 days. And really, that is what allowed Kentucky to go get the guy that they want. Now, as we record here, it's about 11:30 Eastern time on Tuesday. We don't know the exact details of the contract with Will Stein, etc. But I guarantee you the job is a lot less desirable if you have to write a $40 million check to Mark Stoops here within the next, now 58 days. So give him credit. 2, give Mitch Barnhart credit, right? So I'm not, I think I know a lot about Kentucky, right? But I'm not as insulated in the day-to-day frustrations with Mitch Barnhart, but he did give out a bad John Calipari contract that he somehow got out of. And now this Mark Stoops contract doesn't look as bad as we thought it did in real time. And I give him credit for, and really where I give Mitch Barnhart credit, right? Last week we talked about it. I think it was Matt Jones, probably about a week ago, said that he believed that this was Mitch Barnhart's last year as AD at Kentucky and that he would retire in the summer. And I only bring it up because if that's true, it would have been easy for Mitch Barnhart to say, hey, listen, we can't raise funds and sell tickets for football. That ain't my problem. You figure it out next AD. I'm retiring here in a couple months anyway. It would have been easy for him to say, I'm not firing Mark Stoops. He's been my guy forever, whatever. But instead, he did the exact opposite. He fired him. He said, we need a fresh start. It's not going to wait until I leave. We need a fresh start. We need it now. And I'm going to go get the one guy that I actually do think is going to unite my fan base. And that's exactly what Will Stein is. So credit to Mark Stoops, credit to Mitch Barnhart, for getting this job done. And Kentucky fans, you got your man. You know, we're recording here again, 11:30 Eastern time. So I don't know exactly, what the time frame is that I'm aware of. If there's a press conference, if there's whatever. I referenced it a minute ago. I don't even know. I assume he's going to keep coaching in the college football playoff. The good news is, as we get towards signing day, he's going to have a couple, probably about 10 days here before they really start game planning for their opponent. Keep in mind, they don't even know who their opponent is right now. So he probably has the next 5 or 6 days to largely focus on Kentucky before they worry about the college football playoff. Follow Torres on UK. And again, thank you to our friends at Circa Sportsbook in Mint, Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky. I will be there. Matt, before we get to break and talk Lane Kiffin and Ryan Silverfield, positive day one for both. Are there any Kentucky-related questions, comments, whatever? And as always, as I tell you, we do prioritize Super Chats. Luke, who is in the air to Salt Lake City. By the way, beautiful airport, beautiful city. Love Salt Lake City, even though Utah fans think I don't like them. Another conversation for another day. Luke says, Will Stein is exactly what Kentucky needs. Even if Kentucky doesn't have a great record in 2026, having a more exciting brand of football will galvanize the fan base. Stoops' style was bad and boring. So I remember that, whatever year Mike Leach was hired as the Mississippi State head coach, rest in peace, Coach Leach. I remember saying at the time, I don't even remember who was the Mississippi State coach before Mike Leach. I can't even remember. But I remember the team was bad, the football was bad, and it was very uninteresting. And I remember when Mike Leach got hired, I remember thinking to myself, I said, listen, if you're going to be bad, or if you're, Mississippi State, let's be honest, is kind of a historically like a 7-5, 6-6 type team. Joe Moorhead, by the way. I said, if you're going to be bad, at least be bad and interesting. And I said, Mike Leach, might only get you to 7-5, 8-4. Now, unfortunately, they got to nine wins in his final season. And, I can only imagine what would have happened if he was still with us. But I only bring it up because I said, if you're going to be 7-5, you might as well be 7-5, putting up 38 points a game. And so I bring it up because that's exactly who Will Stein, I assume, will be. Even if, listen, the schedule's going to get tougher, right? 9 SEC games plus Louisville. But the brand of football will also be entertaining. I keep going back to the entry point. The entry point right now. Listen, anyone in this league can win if you have the right coach. Ole Miss is going to the college football playoff. Vandy, probably not going to get into the college football playoff, but they just won 10 games. Meanwhile, Florida's coming off a 4-8 season. LSU, I know the win-loss record wasn't terrible, but it was disappointing by their standards. Auburn, a 5-7 season. And so I just bring it up because I just think this is the perfect time. If you're going to be a 33-year-old first-time head coach, 34, 35, whatever he is, 36. You're going to be a 36-year-old first-time head coach. I'd much rather have my team doing that in 2025 than in 2015 or 2017 or 2011. So I'm actually excited about this. We talked about a lot of negativity around Kentucky football this summer and this fall. I think it's going to be a little bit more positive going forward. One or two more if they are there. Otherwise, we will get to some next topics. Eric brings up a great point, and I hope, and I think it is. I think it is appreciated by Kentucky fans. Eric Hart says, nobody can say Stoops hasn't been a true professional and didn't leave in spite. Program owes him a lot. Listen, I had been tipped off. I really believe that if it got bad enough, he would renegotiate. I just can't imagine having $70 million in the bank or $50 million or whatever it is and showing up to a job every day where everybody hated you. But just because that's my personal opinion doesn't mean that had to be Mark Stoops' personal opinion, and that's where I give him credit. I agree with Eric Hart. Nobody can say that Stoops wasn't a true professional on the way out the door and didn't leave in spite. Program owes him a lot. They do. He could have bankrupted the program, right? And how different is this job if you owe Mark Stoops $40 million within the first couple days? It's a totally different deal. We're going to look forward to this Will Stein era, but Mark Stoops, I almost said Mark Pope. We'll be talking about Mark Pope tomorrow, good or bad. I do think Mark Stoops owes the fan base owes him a debt of gratitude, not only for what he did, but the manner in which he left. One, maybe two more. Chesney says, can't wait for the new era of Kentucky football. Just announced the NIL money will be there for Stein. That was another issue, right? Rev share. How much is Kentucky basketball getting? That'll be an interesting conversation. I want to save some of the NIL conversation for Penn State and Kalani Sitake, because this notion that everybody's not going to spend $1 over 25, 20 million, 20.5 million seems nonsensical. And it sounds like, I have not even seen this, Chesney. So it sounds like Will Stein will be well compensated. All right, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk a big day one, Lane Kiffin. It sucks how he left. I was pissed off on Sunday. I ranted. It's time to move on to Lane Kiffin, LSU head coach. We'll talk about that. We will also talk about Ryan Silverfield. Was not familiar with your game, my man. We'll take a quick break, come back, talk a big day one for, I guess it was technically 5 SEC head coaches. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute, but before we do, I have so many people that reach out and say, Torres, you give me hours and hours and hours of free content every day, every month, every year. What can I do to help support the show? Well, you want to support the show and look good in the process. Make sure to check out and support the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Some of you wondering, what can I get in that merch store, Torres? Well, Kentucky fans, we got our Mark Pope Hope and Pope t-shirts. That is right. Mark Pope, monster first year. Year 2 is going to be even better. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirt at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is coming. It is here. John Calipari has things rocking. Get your Big Pig Invasion tees. Again, aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. St. John's fans, we have our Big Rick Energy t-shirts. And if you're just a college basketball fan in general, guess what? Your March is for Day Drinking shirt. That is the shirt that you need year-round, but especially for the next NCAA tournament. You can order yours now. By the way, football fans, we got you covered too. Nebraska fans, new era, new rules, the t-shirt that you need before the start of this coming season. And oh, by the way, if you're a Colorado fan, if you're just a Coach Prime fan, we have our Dion shirts and hats, more of them than we know what to do with. So to check out the full line of Aaron Torres Media merch and also support the show, good news is we're going to have even more for the fall. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And for more information, you can always reach out at Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. All right, everybody. I am back. Good to be back. So first of all, love the Lane Kiffin edit. Producer Matt's been working overtime, all these new coaches, all this new gear. So obviously, look, so Will Stein is the newest SEC head coach, but 5 guys were hired on Sunday into Monday in the SEC, and most of them had some sort of press or media availability on Monday. And I really thought it was a good first day for all of them, right? We're going to get to Ryan Silverfield in a second in Arkansas. Pete Golding is the guy that's going to lead Ole Miss into the playoffs. Alex Golish made it a point to mention that he does not golf, which I think won over the Auburn fans more than any recruiting win that he could possibly have. I thought John Summerall showed, hey, look, just because I'm from the G5 does not mean I'm Billy Napier. And so it was a positive first day. But what I do want to talk about now is a big first day for that man right there, Lane Kiffin with the LSU Tigers. First of all, crazy to me how big this story got. Crazy to me. I was prepping for the show, going in the other room. My wife's watching Good Morning America. They're talking about Lane Kiffin on Good Morning America. Okay. Speaking of talking about Lane Kiffin, Torres on LSU for all of your late breaking LSU coverage. Torres on LSU. Okay. But bottom line is, this story was huge. Sunday, I spent a lot of time talking about the way that Lane Kiffin left Ole Miss for LSU. But the bottom line is it's done. Ole Miss has moved on. LSU has moved on. Brian Kelly has certainly moved on. And Lane Kiffin has moved on. And so now it's time to talk about Lane Kiffin as the LSU head football coach. And the one thing I did say on Sunday, I said, look, listen, I'm allowed to feel the way that I feel about the departure. But when we start talking about Lane Kiffin, LSU head football coach, I think he's going to win big. I think he's going to win quick. And I think transparently, there is a reason that both LSU wanted him and he wanted LSU. And frankly, it took one day to see why this partnership could be magic and could produce playoff appearances for sure, and maybe national championships, plural. Okay, so Lane Kiffin gets the job late Sunday, hops on that plane to Baton Rouge. Let's dive into exactly what happened from the moment that he got to Baton Rouge, because I thought it was interesting who greeted him, maybe not necessarily on the tarmac, but basically within minutes of arriving in Baton Rouge, okay? Producer Matt, let's not waste any time. Let's get right to the video. How about this? Lamar Brown, some believe the number one recruit in America, verbally committed to LSU, set to sign on Wednesday. He was the first face that Lane Kiffin saw in Baton Rouge. So that video, credit of Michael Cobble, I believe is how you say his name, WBRZ Sports in Louisiana. Want to give them credit. They were on the ground. But I think that video is a metaphor for why Lane Kiffin so very much coveted this job. And by the way, why everyone, including apparently Nick Saban, another conversation for another day, advised him to take the job. It is because, listen, I said this when Brian Kelly got fired. I said, listen, Brian Kelly was a disaster, and you could tell Brian Kelly was a disaster early because LSU started looking like LSU should never look. Slow, unathletic, whatever. And I said it at the time. I said, in my opinion, there are 4 jobs that if they have the right person, can simply operate at a level that no one else in college football can operate at. Ohio State is 1. Georgia is 1, Texas is 1, and I believe LSU is the 4th. And if you're making me rank jobs, I might even argue that LSU is the number 1 job in America because unlike Texas, unlike Georgia, there is no other power conference school in your state. And so it's not just that you have access to good talent, and I do still think it matters in this modern era. I know a lot of people say, oh, the portal doesn't matter. No. You still want to build your foundation with high school players and developmental players and players that are staying in your program for 3, 4, 5 years. Just because Lane Kiffin has made the portal work doesn't mean that that's the best way to build a program. And as a matter of fact, that's a big part of the reason why Lane Kiffin came to LSU is because he said, look, I can recruit 30 great high school players a year. And even if all of them don't work out, I don't have to go to the portal for 15, 20, 25 players every single season. And so to me, the fact that Lamar Brown met him at the airport tells me everything I need to know. And I think it's a great metaphor for 2 very specific reasons. One, this is the exact type of player that Lane Kiffin could not consistently get at Ole Miss. I know that he was able to get really high-level players specifically through the portal and occasionally the high school guy. Well, this is the number 1 player in America who literally plays high school football or did play high school football. I don't know if his season's still going on. Less than 10 minutes from where your campus is, from where Tiger Stadium is. He is he's listed as an athlete, but he's going to be a defensive lineman. But that is the type of dude that you can't get very many places, and you can get a lot of those types of players in Louisiana. And I think what's as important and why I think Lamar Brown is a good metaphor for all of this is because Lamar Brown is a player who committed to Brian Kelly. And when Brian Kelly got fired, there was never really a serious moment where Lamar Brown seriously considered decommitting. Texas A&M tried to get in the mix. Miami tried to get in the mix. But for the most part, he stayed committed to LSU. As best I know, didn't take any other visits after Brian Kelly was fired. He just said, I want to be a Tiger, right? And again, perfect metaphor for why Lane Kiffin wanted this job. Number one recruit in America, could go anywhere in the world. He only wants to be an LSU Tiger, and that's what makes the LSU job unique. Number one state per capita in terms of NFL players produced, and they all grow up wanting to be LSU Tigers. You know, it's funny. I remember 2 cycles ago, so I guess it would have been maybe the 2025 cycle, 2024 cycle, but I remember even when Brian Kelly had no momentum, I think he got 9 of the top 10 players out of high school in Louisiana and like something crazy like 18 out of the top 20 or something. That's just all these kids want to play in Louisiana for LSU, and I think that matters. So credit to Lane Kiffin. Gets met at the airport by the number one recruit in America. That's a sign that, hey, honey, we're not in Kansas anymore. We're not at Ole Miss anymore. It's probably the better way to put it. 2, should also mention Richard Anderson. Top 10 prospect, depending on which recruiting service. Matt, you could pop the tweet. It appears as though he has told Shea Dixon, who has been on the LSU beat forever, yeah, go ahead, shut down my recruitment. He goes to Edna Carr High School, a famous high school in the state of Louisiana in New Orleans. And he said, listen, shut down my recruitment. It's done. I'm staying home. I'm not going anywhere. So 2 5-stars from the state within hours of Lane Kiffin being named the head coach. I mean, these are like first-round NFL-type talents. And I'm not saying that Lane Kiffin isn't going to work hard. What I am saying is these are the types of players that you just don't have access to at virtually any other school in America. So that was part 1 of Lane Kiffin's first day on campus. Just lock it in 2 5-stars like it's nothing. But beyond that, I thought there were some very interesting things that happened with his coaching staff. First of all, this goes back to Sunday. Some interesting names that joined him on the plane from Baton Rouge to LSU, or from Ole Miss to LSU. Matt, you can pop up that tweet. The first one that stood out to me, first of all, I know Charlie Weiss Jr. was on the plane. I'll be honest. One, I think he's a candidate for a couple of these G5 jobs. Maybe by the time you listen to this, he's a G5 head coach, but he was on the plane. But on top of that, wide receivers coach George McDonald. The interesting names to me, GM Billy Glasscock. Okay, so this is very interesting, and I'll tell you why. One of the big holdups with the Florida job was that Florida and Scott Strickland, who in hindsight, I don't even know if Scott Strickland ever really wanted Lane Kiffin. I think he knew that he basically had to pursue him and that if he didn't, his fan base would run him out of town. But at Florida, one of the big things was that they wanted an outside general manager to run day-to-day, player personnel operations. They ended up hiring David Caldwell, who's a former NFL GM. I'll tell you, I don't love the NFL guys coming in because they don't understand the high school recruiting scene. Another conversation for another day. But I only bring it up because Lane Kiffin said no. That was one of the big holdups. He said, I want to bring my player personnel guy. And so the fact that Billy Glasscock, who is very well respected in college football circles, and oh, by the way, on top of that, is a guy that Lane Kiffin clearly inherently trusts, clearly helped him build that program. Safe to say that is a major, major, major win for him to get his player personnel guy. And I think, frankly, it was part of the deal, right? Like, if you're not going to let me bring the people that I trust, I'm not coming. And I think that was what the holdup with Florida was. And I think it's the opposite at LSU, where basically, from what I understand, Verge Ausberry, the new AD, basically said, what do you need? We'll give it to you. So you have that. The strength coach, that's always going to be a factor. Nick Savage was on that plane as well. But what I also thought was interesting was some of the stuff that came out at his press conference on Monday. First of all, I think this was reported even before the press conference, is that Blake Baker, the defensive coordinator, is planning on staying as defensive coordinator at LSU under Lane Kiffin. Now, the only holdup that was, I think Matt Zenitz had it first. We definitely put out his tweet. Blake Baker, so a couple things. The only holdup here could be that he is interviewing for G5 jobs. And I think Tulane specifically is probably the one that he is potentially going to get. But if you can retain Blake Baker, and listen, I don't retain him if you don't think he's the right guy. But Lane Kiffin and the offense, Lane Kiffin's got the offense. Again, whatever you think of how Lane Kiffin left Ole Miss, we cannot deny he is a brilliant offensive mind who puts up points everywhere he goes, okay? But beyond that, what I would also say is that defense is actually what carried LSU this past year. And it's so interesting to think about the evolution of LSU under Brian Kelly. 3 seasons ago, they had the Heisman Trophy winner in Jaden Daniels, but it was the defense that couldn't get off the field. Well, Blake Baker in 2 years takes the defense from a situation where they were ranked somewhere in the 100s in total defense to a top 25 defense this season, and to Matt Zenitz's point, a top 15 scoring defense in college football. And so I just bring it up because, also, I don't know why I keep saying I just bring it up, but I just bring it up to say, you put Lane Kiffin in charge of the offense, you put Blake Baker in charge of the defense, and here's the other thing too. Blake Baker knows the personnel, so there shouldn't be a huge drop-off. Now, there's a lot of talent to replace, but there shouldn't be a huge drop-off because he knows the personnel. He knows who's good. He knows who's not. He knows who wants to work. He knows who doesn't. He knows who has one foot out the door. And in theory, that defense should pick up largely where it left off with the additions of a couple really good players out of the high school ranks. And on top of that, also some guys out of the portal that we know Lane Kiffin will land. So the defense is largely taken care of. Also thought it was interesting. Lane Kiffin said that Frank Wilson, the interim head coach, is going to stay on through the bowl game as the interim head coach of the team. So he is basically going to run the day-to-day operations, run the coaching, run the whatever. And that to me is key as well, because Frank Wilson, for people who do not know, Louisiana legend, okay? Coached high school ball in New Orleans, has all the relationships. I don't have his Wikipedia page in front of me, but Coach O valued the crap out of him. I think it goes back, Les Miles. The point I bring up is that, to me, that is a guy that you're going to want on your staff, and nothing's guaranteed, but I presume he is going to stay on staff, right? If Lane Kiffin's the portal king, you want guys that understand the state of Louisiana and recruiting in Louisiana on your side, and quite literally, nobody knows it better than Frank Wilson. By the way, total wild card, which I hadn't even thought of until right now, wouldn't stun me if Coach O ends up there. This is total speculation on my part. My guess is we're all waiting to see if Coach O can get a head coaching job. I would assume it'll be at the G5 level. I don't know where it would be. Tulane was one that made sense to me, but again, it looks like they're going with Blake Baker. But wouldn't shock me if Coach O came. We'll see if that happens. But lastly, let me also say this. So we talked about 2 5-stars that have already committed. We talked about player personnel people that were on the plane. We talked about strength people that were on the plane. We talked about the fact that Lane Kiffin's going to run the offense. Blake Baker's going to run the defense. We've talked about the fact that Frank Wilson is a rock star in Louisiana recruiting circles. The last thing that I saw that caught my attention from Monday, did you see what Lane Kiffin tweeted out early Monday morning? So Lane Kiffin does his Monday, his morning testimonials, and he's quoting, I'm assuming, Bible verses. I don't know. But he posted one on Monday that you can pop up, producer Matt. And I'm not going to read the whole verse. It says, let the seams unravel and reform your entire life, blah, blah, blah. Why it was noteworthy. His caption, exhale, have the best Monday ever, hashtag God's plan. And it had a tiger emoji and an emoji of the flag of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, maybe it means nothing. We know Lane Kiffin likes to troll and get people talking and get people thinking. But what I know is 2 things. Lane Kiffin, for all the criticism, turned Trinidad Chamblas into one of the best quarterbacks in college football, taking him from the D2 level to one of the, if not the best quarterback in the SEC this year. Trinidad Chamblas, I presume at this point is going to play in the bowl. Who knows with that whole fiasco. But he is fighting and petitioning the NCAA for another year of college eligibility. Lane Kiffin hinting that in addition to the 2 5-stars, in addition to all of the defensive coaches and offensive coaches and strength coaches and player personnel people. Is Lane Kiffin hinting that he is bringing his quarterback with him? I guess it remains to be seen. So very good first day for Lane Kiffin. Do want to switch gears to a guy that, I didn't know what to expect day one. I'll be honest. Maybe I didn't expect very much. That's Ryan Silverfield at the University of Arkansas. Okay. And so let's talk Ryan Silverfield. Let's talk Arkansas, and let's be fair on all accounts to what was said by me and by a lot of people on Sunday when this hire became official. Okay. By the way, another great edit by Matt over here. So Ryan Silverfield, he gets hired. I don't know that I certainly didn't love the hire. It's for all the stuff that we talked about. Probably the most resources in the group of five, went 8-4, lost 3 straight to end the regular season, whatever. But it was the hire after a culmination of several months in which there was a real moment in time where people thought Arkansas was getting James Franklin, and there was a real moment in time where people thought Arkansas was getting Alex Golish. And so you get neither. It's another stain on Hunter Yurachek, the AD's resume. And if you listen to Sunday's show, I didn't even really talk so much about the hire, Ryan Silverfield, could it work? It was more Hunter Yurachek just keeps screwing up everything. The wrong messaging. Said at a media availability earlier this summer or earlier this fall that we're not built to win in the SEC currently. We know, whatever, it's not totally his fault, but he didn't really make the John Calipari hire. John Tyson did. And so I only bring it up because I think there was a lot of negativity Sunday going into Monday about Ryan Silverfield. Then Ryan Silverfield had a first day on the job for the ages. And I got to be honest, feels like momentum has slipped a lot. There's a lot of Silverfield supporters out there in Arkansas. So let's go ahead and just dive into an awesome first day for Ryan Silverfield. I was not familiar with your game, my man, because he crushed it on day one. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about some recruiting stuff in a minute. But before we get there, I want to play a clip. Hogs Plus, and Arkansas fans correct me, but I believe is kind of their NIL media outlet. And there's a lot of stuff behind a paywall, but they put out clips. I've actually been on the Hogs Plus show with Coach Z and the guys there. But why I want to discuss it is because I didn't see the whole interview. I don't know if the whole interview is behind a paywall. But I saw a clip that started to go viral on my timeline on Tuesday. It was about Ryan Silverfield talking about not only the Arkansas job, but why he wanted the Arkansas job, why he expects to win big at the Arkansas job right away. Producer Matt, you could play that sound.
About Arkansas football, I think about the rich traditions, the history of this place, and I think about winning football. I don't think about the recent history and what was me. No, what we're going to get back to. And then actually what we're going to get past and show people, listen, why can't this be the best football program in the entire country? And it doesn't have to sit there and say, okay, Ryan, is it going to take 5 years, 10 years? What's your plan? No, it's a right now mentality. We're going to have to win right now. We're going to have to bring in the right type of people right now and go show people what we're all about and go show the country what Arkansas is really all about.
So that was Ryan Silverfield on day one. Again, courtesy of Hogs Plus. And so let's just spend half a second on that because, listen, every coach on day one is going to talk about this is the greatest job ever, can't wait to be here, can't wait to get started, all of that. I do think that message at that moment in time, at this moment in time, specifically at Arkansas, is important specifically for this fan base and for this job. Okay, so what do I mean by that? What I mean is that, listen, you don't need to me to tell you, the vibes at Arkansas about this football program are pretty low right now, okay? And it's nobody's fault, but you're coming off a 2-10 season. You're coming off an 0-8 slate in the SEC. And I think as importantly, I said it a second ago, the messaging has been terrible, right? Hunter Yurachek literally said at the Little Rock Touchdown Club back in September, we're not really built to win in the SEC. And it's like, can't say that. Even if you think it, you don't ever say that. And so once that comes out, it just becomes a situation of like, the vibes are just low. And so then you follow that up with a 2-10 season, 0-8 in the SEC. And so I do think it's just important to hear a coach say, like, I believe in this place. I know what happened this past fall. I know it hasn't been a great, 10, 12 years overall since Bobby Petrino left the first time, but I associate this place with winning. I'm old enough to remember Bobby Petrino 1.0. I'm old enough to remember Houston not going to SEC championship games. I'm old enough to remember maybe even Lou Holtz back in the day. That I don't know. That might be a little bit before his time. But to me, that does matter. That messaging of like, why can't we win here? It goes back to what we said with Will Stein a few minutes ago. If Diego Pavia and Clark Lee can win at Vanderbilt, if Lane Kiffin can win at Ole Miss, there's no reason that either Will Stein can't win at Kentucky, or in this case, that Ryan Silverfield can't win at the University of Arkansas. So I thought that messaging was very important. And to take it a step further, I also think what happened on Monday is probably even more important. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about some of this Ryan Silverfield stuff, because I'll tell you what, I was busy covering the Mark Stoops stuff and Kalani Sitake, what's going on there. Every time I logged into social media, Ryan Silverfield was flipping somebody else. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. And listen, so before we get into this, let me do the caveat. I'm not a high school football recruiting expert, okay? But so I'm not going to sit here and break down, well, this 3-technique lineman, like that's not what we're going to do. But what I will say, I noticed trends, and I noticed a very important trend in high school football recruiting on Monday afternoon. Ryan Silverfield is going after dogs, and he's going after dogs from Arkansas specifically. Okay, so the first thing that I saw, how about this? You guys familiar with the name Danny Beal? Danny Beal is the #1 ranked high school player in the state of Arkansas. Previously was committed to Oklahoma State from beautiful Cherry Valley, Arkansas, by the way, which I looked up. Population of 700 and change in Cross County. I did some very early Cherry Valley, Arkansas research, so that was fun. Home of Paul Young, by the way, an innovative fly fisherman. Learned that as well at about 5:35 Pacific time on Tuesday morning. The places Wikipedia takes you, let me tell you. Anyway, back to Danny Beal, because one day I expect him to be on that Wikipedia page for Cherry Valley, Arkansas, because was committed to Arkansas, boom, on Monday, or was committed to Oklahoma State, had decommitted a few weeks ago, but on Monday commits to the University of Arkansas. This is Eli Letterman of ESPN saying he's the 109th ranked prospect in America. Major in-state pledge for Ryan Silverfield. And if all Ryan Silverfield did on Monday was flip, or he didn't technically flip, but you get the point, get a commitment from the #1 recruit in the state, that'd be a pretty good day. But my man Ryan Silverfield was not done, because just hours later, what happened? Oh, I don't know. Ja'Cory Smith, 3-star linebacker, was committed to Oklahoma, flips to Arkansas. Again, not a recruiting expert, but if Brent Venables thinks you're good enough to play linebacker for him, I'm guessing you're probably a pretty good player. Cool. Ryan Silverfield, probably done at that point. Right, wrong, think again. That is because, remember, last week, Eli Drinkowitz, Missouri, beats Arkansas in the rivalry game. Eli Drinkowitz says, I'm from Arkansas. Hope they can figure it out. Hope they get things going. I love my school. And he said, I didn't say I love my school. He said, I love my state. I love where I'm from. Well, Eli Drinkowitz, you better watch out for your recruits, because Ryan Silverfield is coming forward, baby. Terry Hodges, #2 player in the state of Arkansas, running back, committed to Missouri, flips to the Arkansas Razorbacks. And then, oh, by the way, to end the day, my man Ryan Silverfield wasn't done. Anthony Kennedy, D lineman from the city of Little Rock, was committed to Miami, flips to the University of Arkansas. So in day one, Ryan Silverfield not only had time to hang out with Hogs Plus, my boy Matt Z, Coach Z, he also flipped 4 players overall. He didn't flip them, but you get the point. 4 players overall. 3 of the top 4 players in the state of Arkansas, and players who had previously been committed to Oklahoma, Missouri, Miami, and Oklahoma State. Okay? And so listen, is it the be-all, end-all? I don't know. You obviously need more than 4 players to make a program, right? You do. We all understand that. And I'm not saying that, oh my God, he's the next Nick Saban and just line up the national championships. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is it is about messaging, one, and the message is he wants to be there. He's expecting to win. And 2, he is clearly transferring that to players, at least the ones from the state of Arkansas. And listen, none of us have a crystal ball. None of us know what's going to happen. None of us know if this is going to work or not. But you know what's a good way to get started in building a football program from the ground up? And Arkansas is certainly that. Keeping the local kids at home. And so to get 3 of the top 4 players in the state committed, who all were committed to big-time programs, including my man Danny Beal from Cherry Valley, Arkansas. I can't wait to visit Cherry Valley. I'll be there sometime soon. It's totally positive momentum and the totally right way that you want to go about building this thing out. And so again, we don't have a crystal ball. He's got a lot more work to do. Arkansas had a minuscule class to begin with because obviously, a lot of kids decommitted throughout the process of Sam Pittman being fired and uncertainty with the coaching staff. So, I don't know where the recruiting class is going to end up. And I don't know if this is the end of the recruiting run for Ryan Silverfield. We're going to find all of that out here in the next couple weeks. One, National Signing Day is, of course, Wednesday, so that's worth noting. Don't know how many more kids there will even be to flip at that point. And then 2, it is obviously going to come down to retaining the right guys, portal, who do you get? And then 3, obviously, what kind of coaching staff that you put together. And those are all things that we're going to find out in the future. But I always say this on this show. I go back to my original Fox Sports Radio partner, Arnie Spanier, radio legend, been around forever. He's got this big old gravelly voice. And he always said, Torres, the show's tonight. And what that means, what that meant, what that still means, I still just did a show with Arnie a few weeks ago, is that we can't start projecting to, this recruiting run means nothing because who knows how good they're going to be. No. You can't do that. Just like you can't be like, whatever, the Lakers traded for Luka, give them the next 5. We don't know. All we can do is base our opinions on what we know in the moment. And what I think that I know in the moment is that I did not expect Ryan Silverfield to essentially flip 4 kids, all from major power conference teams, mostly from the state of Arkansas, in day 1. And so we'll see what happens from here. National Signing Day is Wednesday. I thought it was interesting. Ryan Silverfield actually is not doing his press conference until later in the week. I wonder if he maybe knew a flip or 2 was coming and they didn't want to do the press conference on Monday and not allow him to be able to talk about some of these kids. But I bring it up because it's an exciting time. It's a fun time. And let me wrap by saying this. There is one more person who was very impressed by the first couple days or the first day of the Ryan Silverfield era. That's John Calipari. So John Calipari, remember, before he was at Arkansas, he was at Kentucky. Before he was at Kentucky, where was he at, people? The University of Memphis. So he knows people from Memphis, and he made a few phone calls on Ryan Silverfield. And let's just say he likes what he saw. Play the sound, man.
Ryan was hired. I called 5 or 6 of my buddies in Memphis that I knew would know him. And all I wanted to know, is he a good guy? That's what I wanted to know, because I don't know much about football, okay? But I wanted to know, is he a good guy? And they came back, and they all were glowing about him. They said he's a worker, he's a grinder, he is a terrific person. And then I'm hearing they're like top 20 offenses every year. And this maybe I'm wrong, but all those guys that got those jobs from that league, he was 5-0 against them.
That's right.
He's 5-0 against them. And, I think, again, this is a place that I'm just saying you could do some special things in basketball, in football, in baseball, in softball, in soccer, in golf. And what about that track stuff?
Pretty good at that.
Just think about what I'm saying. Women's basketball, football. I mean, when I bring people to campus and they see those facilities and that stadium and all that, they're like, wow. So, no, I told him I said, I'm here for you. Whatever you need from me, however I can help you. I heard he flipped a few recruits already. Let's give him a hand. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Keep doing that. And, I think he's going to do a great job. And I'm happy that I can help if I can. Whatever I can do, I'll be there for him.
That was John Calipari talking about the new head football coach. So one, I think his facts weren't quite right. He said Silverfield was undefeated against all the coaches that got jobs. I believe they lost to John Summerall and Tulane just a few weeks ago. But listen, facts are optional, baby. I think, first of all, I love that John Calipari has become like part basketball coach. He's like part basketball coach, part like tourism bureau head. But one thing I will say about Cal, and this is not a Cal segment, I promise, it is clear that he loves living in Fayetteville, loves living in Northwest Arkansas. And I'll take it a step further. What Coach Cal said is a lot of what I saw when I was on campus 2 years ago. Ironically, it was right around this time. I was there for the ACC SEC Challenge, which starts today in basketball. I was there when Duke played in Bud Walton. But, until you get to that campus, until you see that area, how beautiful it is, how beautiful the new buildings are. I remember, I'll tell you a quick side story. I remember parking at Bud Walton, and where the media parks is next to the softball field. And the softball field lights were on. And I remember taking a picture to my wife and be like, this is the softball stadium. She's like, I've never seen anything like it. So what Cal said is accurate. It's all there. And again, I do still think like the old school stuff is important. It's why Lane Kiffin took the LSU job, because the high school recruiting is so good. But if Clark Lee can win at Vandy, if Lane Kiffin can win at Ole Miss, if Eli Drinkowitz can win at Missouri, Arkansas, you can win football games there. Coach Cal appears to agree. Now it's up to Ryan Silverfield, but a heck of a first day for the new head coach. All right, so what I want to do, I want to take one more break, come back. When we do, talk Penn State. What is going on there? Kalani Sitake, baby. Kalani Sitake, no. Kalani Sitake, what if they don't get him? It's getting dark awfully early at Penn State. Quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, you know what we got to do. We got to thank our friends. We got to thank our partners. We got to go ahead and thank Collie Puffs and ColliePuffs.com. Yeah, you see the logo on the back of the screen right here. Okay, so I've told you all about Collie Puffs, but family-owned company, not far from where I live. Joey, a huge sports fan. And one day he was sitting on the couch and he said, you know what? I need a snack that is both healthy but delicious, something my kids are going to love, something my family's going to love, something I'm going to love. And so he came up with Collie Puffs. This is the new age health food snack. You don't need to go to the grocery aisle and buy all that crap, the Doritos, the Fritos. No, my friends, you need Collie Puffs. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease, healthy ingredients. But here's the best part. They taste freaking delicious. Actually, there's another best part. In addition to tasting delicious, in addition to being healthy, they are also taking care of listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. Okay, so check this out. All you got to do is go to ColliePuffs.com. That's CAULIPUFFS.com, ColliePuffs.com, and you can get 15% off any purchase with the promo code Torres. That's Torres, Torres. It's that simple. 15% off any purchase. One bag to try them out, 100 bags to cater a party. Doesn't really matter. Promo code Torres. ColliePuffs.com gets you 15% off. Collie Puffs also available on Amazon. You obviously can't get the promo code there, but ColliePuffs.com, ColliePuffs.com, promo code Torres gets you 15% off any purchase. Thank you to our friends at Collie Puffs. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Good to be back. Final segment of the show. So good to be back. Thank you again, by the way, to Collie Puffs. Promo code Torres gets you 15% off any purchase. So you could have purchased them once, can go back. This isn't, we love SeatGeek, but you only use promo code Torres once on SeatGeek. Collie Puffs, 15% off any purchase, anytime, anywhere. You want to buy one bag or 100. Great to have around your house around the holidays. Thank you to Collie Puffs. All right, let's keep it going. Let's go ahead and wrap with what is certainly an interesting story. And, it's funny. I go back to Sunday, right? And we're in the middle of this show. And boom, 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 stuff just keeps popping, right? Arkansas hires this guy, and Ole Miss hires this guy, and Auburn hires this guy, and Florida hires this guy, and Lane Kiffin's on a plane, and what's going on? I bring it up because you come up for air after that show, and you realize, like, oh, wait, Penn State has not made its head coaching decision yet. Like, what the hell is going on there? Okay. And so I bring it up because, I did a little segment on this yesterday, but, there had been rumors and innuendo for weeks or for days, really, that there was some sort of mystery candidate at Penn State, that there was somebody that nobody was talking about. Who could it be? Whatever. And I mentioned this on the show yesterday, is like there was a moment in time where I was told, could it be Lincoln Riley? There was a moment in time where I was told, could it be Josh Heupel? Well, Lincoln Riley, I don't think is going anywhere. Josh Heupel did tell Chris Lowe of On 3 that he will not be leaving Tennessee. That's a weird situation, by the way, just with Josh Heupel. Fans seem to be frustrated with him. Anyway, so it kind of became like, who is this mystery candidate that everybody's talking about? And so late Sunday into Monday, I didn't see this until Monday morning. I think it started breaking late Sunday. Reports started surfacing that Kalani Sitake, the head coach of BYU, which is one game away from the college football playoff, could be leaving his alma mater for Penn State. And so we did an immediate reaction on Monday afternoon. But what I will say is this. I do think I sniffed this out pretty good. We are recording, to be clear, it is 12:15 Eastern time in the afternoon. So a little after noon Eastern, which is about 10:15 Mountain time in beautiful, and it is beautiful, Provo, Utah, okay? Stuff can change. I don't know what can happen. But I do not believe Kalani Sitake is going to be the next Penn State head coach, which leads to two interesting questions. One, what the heck is this all about? And then two, on top of it, what the heck is Penn State going to do? So as far as Kalani Sitake is concerned, okay, so a couple things. So as soon as I saw this story, I go, doesn't pass the smell test. I could see in theory why Penn State is interested, but is Kalani Sitake really going to leave his alma mater and the place in the state that he has spent virtually his entire coaching career? Okay, so for people who are not familiar with his career, played at BYU, and then virtually his entire coaching career has been either at BYU, Utah under Kyle Whittingham, or as importantly, also at, I believe it's Eastern Utah, I want to say. Hear a lot of good things about their football program. Might be Southern Utah. Forgive me. I don't know. Thunderbirds, by the way. I believe Southern Utah is the Thunderbirds. Anyway, bring it up because just a Utah guy through and through. And I started sending some texts. I started checking some stuff. And the first thing that stood out, Kalani Sitake's salary is $3 million a year. And I was like, well, I mean, yeah, if Penn State's offering me 10 plus, 11 plus, yeah, I'm going to probably listen when I'm making 3. And now listen, I'll do the caveat. $3 million is more than virtually anybody watching this show is making, more than I'm making. It's a great way to live a life, okay? It is not, though, in line with what a person in his specific position is normally compensated. What do I mean by that? Well, listen, we know, like, the get-in price for a new college football coach is basically like $7 or $8 million, okay? Like, even the guys that have zero SEC head coaching experience, zero whatever, they're making like 6, 7, 8 a year. Alex Golish making 6, 7, Ryan Silverfield making whatever, John Summerall making whatever. Kalani Sitake, who won 11 games last year. This isn't a one-year blip. 11 wins last year, making $3 million. Even in the Big 12, that's insane. Kenny Dillingham's making $7.5 million per year this year. That's double what Kalani Sitake is making. Kalani Sitake, if the tiebreakers had broken a little bit different, could have been the team in the college football playoff with BYU last year, not Arizona State. Beyond that, Deion Sanders, who I love. I'm not here to criticize Deion. Tough year health-wise, tough year on the field. He's making over $8 million a year. Kalani Sitake is making $3 million. I am also told, I won't bore you with too many details, that his coaching staff, relative again to their peers, is very much undercompensated. By the way, Kyle Whittingham making over $7 million a year. Kyle Whittingham deserves every penny, but it also means that Kalani Sitake deserves more. So Kalani Sitake is not making very much money. Again, I'm told that his coaching staff, relative to other power conference teams, does not make very much money. And so to me, this has always felt like much more of a leverage play to like, hey, put us on par with everybody else. Like, what are we even doing here? Like, I'm not complaining about $3 million, but I mean, come on, man, relative to everybody else, it's a joke. And so to me, this was about the salary. This was about the money. And I think it's about a few other things as well. One, I can tell you this firsthand. So fun side fact about Torres. I was on campus the day, with producer Matt, by the way, the day the new BYU AD was hired, okay? New BYU AD Brian Santiago had his press conference. We actually shook his hand in the lobby. No big deal, whatever. Sick brag, I know. But I bring it up because when I go back to that day, a couple things stand out. There are a few things that you need to know about Brian Santiago. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's reality. We were in town that day to interview AJ DeBonsa, okay? #1 high school recruit in America, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Brian Santiago has, and I hope his name is Brian Santiago, otherwise I'm going to feel like an idiot. Let me make sure that I'm saying his name correctly, because if not, then I'm just going to feel really dumb. Brian Santiago, BYU AD. So Brian Santiago is a former basketball player and is a guy who has a background in basketball and in basketball administration. Now, that's great for Kevin Young. That's great for AJ DeBonsa, Richie Saunders, Rob Wright, BYU basketball. But at the same time, administratively, in the rise of basketball, I can tell you, I know firsthand, football feels like they're not getting the same love. And I'm not here to get into BYU politics and who deserves what and whatever. Kevin Young's the man. We've had him on the show. Love him. He deserves his piece of the pie, but Kalani Sitake deserves his piece of the pie as well, okay? So I think there's that kind of internal push-pull. And then the other thing I will say, and I have been told this, is that, remember, rev share has started, right? We're in this rev share world where you can pay $20.5 million to your administrative, to your athletes. And there is kind of a thought, there was a thought, I should say, that it was going to be almost capped at $20.5 million, that nobody was going to spend more than $20.5 million. And anyone with a brain was like, well, wait a second. Well, that's not going to happen. You can't have basketball teams where the roster is making $10 million this year and now cap them at $2.5 million, whatever. Sorry, can't do that. By the way, it's the same in football, where part of why Lane Kiffin took the LSU job, he was promised $25 million in NIL money, which is nice, except the cap is supposed to be at 20.5, and that's after all the other, sports, get their piece of the pie as well. So I bring it up because no one's sticking to this $20.5 million. But I can tell you, behind the scenes, BYU has been adamant of like, whatever the number is, we're not going past it. And if the rules change, we'll adjust at that time. But we are not going to do it in this moment. In this moment, we're playing by the rules, and the rules are $20.5 million. And so I don't know all of the dynamics, but what I do know is that I think Kalani Sitake, probably part of it is like, look, we're now in these recruiting battles. The football portal's about to open. Nobody's sticking to this $20.5 million. And if the budget is, say, like 14 for the football team, that's not going to be enough to put together a national, the roster that you expect us to compete at the level that we're at right now. So I think it's a lot of NIL money. I think it's a lot about his salary. I think it's a lot of other people's salary. And I'll say this, I'm not I don't have my calculator out. And I'm not here to tell BYU how to spend their money, but I think you got the right coach, the right guy at the right moment in time for your university. And so it does go back to tomorrow. It does go back to what I said a minute ago and what I said yesterday talking about this very issue. Kalani Sitake is at his alma mater. His alma mater has been waiting for this moment in time for BYU fans. You tell me, but you're in a power conference. You are on the same level as all of your competition, as all of your peers. This is the moment that BYU has been waiting for. Recruiting is through the roof. I remember talking about the Ryder Lyons commitment back in the middle of the summer. Remember Ryder Lyons, one of the top quarterbacks in America? LDS kid from California, committed to BYU. BYU has one of the top-rated recruiting classes in the Big 12. BYU has several 4- and 5-star prospects, and this is trending to be quite possibly the best recruiting class that they have ever put together. And so to me, doesn't make sense for him to leave at this moment. But if he feels like he's being disrespected, and if Penn State is going to triple his salary and BYU is going to come nowhere close, you also can't blame him. My guess is he comes back. My guess is he gets paid. By the way, he was obviously asked about this at his Monday availability prior to the Big 12 championship game. Kind of just played it coy. No, we're focused on football. Bad question to ask. Here's what he said. He said, it's a quote, "It's a good sign because it means things are going well for us." So that is what Kalani Sitake said. I don't expect him to be the next Penn State head football coach. But again, it is now 12:23 Eastern time, 10:23 Mountain time. By the time many of you see this, a lot could change. Really quickly, I don't know what this means for Penn State. I'm sure some of you saw, but the Penn State AD's Twitter account was literally hacked, and he basically said, quote unquote, and I'm air quoting here, like, we're screwed. This is bad. So we'll see what happens there. I think they're basically out of candidates that I think would make the fan base happy as far as their next head football coach, right? Bob Chesney appears to be off the board going to UCLA. By the way, shout out my boy Ed, UCLA fan, wants me to talk Bob Chesney. We're going to have to save it for another day because we're at an hour and a half. We're not doing a Bob Chesney segment 120 into the show. But at the same time, Bob Chesney is off the board. Josh Heupel isn't coming, as I said. If you don't get Kalani Sitake, and by the way, I'm not trying to be mean here. I don't know how many Penn State fans even want Kalani Sitake. Don't want him. Don't want, I'm not going to get into social media semantics, but I don't think Penn State fans want him overall. And so the question becomes, who do you get that's going to make that fan base happy? And it's got to be somebody that's Here's the thing. You would think it'd be somebody that's coaching this weekend, but all those coaches already spoken for. John Summerall's going to Florida after the Tulane, championship game. Eric Morris is going to Oklahoma State. Bob Chesney is apparently going to UCLA. So maybe it's Brian Hartline. Maybe it's Brian Dable. I don't know. I just know this thing is a total disaster. All right, I'll tell you what, Matt, 1 to 2 questions, but I got to go ahead and get out of here because I got something to actually do here in about 10 minutes. Let's see here. What do we got here? Talking about Coach Cal, shouting out Ryan Silverfield. Cal is a gangster. Okay. He is. I love it. Somebody said, so happy that Will Stein is our head coach. It may take him a few seasons, but definitely an upgrade over Stoops. Listen, I know we all want to live in this portal world where we expect to win right away. It will take time. But as Luke said earlier in the show, the good news is that, at minimum, the product on the field is going to be much more entertaining than it has been. We've all lived through the Mark Stoops era. It hasn't been pretty. I think the product will be better. And I just go back to, if Clark Lee can build a 10-win team at Vandy, if Eli Drinkowitz can build a consistent 8, 9, 10-win team at Missouri, I know the schedules get tougher with more SEC games next year. No reason to think that Will Stein can't do the same. All right, question for you. Some say that agent Jimmy Sexton is at war with Penn State over the James Franklin firing. Any fire from that smoke? So I did, great question. And by the way, this is, N. Dallin, who I think is a BYU fan. This has been a rumor that's kind of floating around social media. I have not personally heard that. Listen, stuff could. So let me put it this way. I saw the report on social media. So I can't say that I haven't personally heard that. I haven't personally heard that in sports media circles, talking to sources, this and that. I have not heard that. It feels weird to me. One thing with Jimmy Sexton, it feels like he does a very good job of, pushing the boundaries for his clients without upsetting people, because there are guys that go back to him time and time again for more clients. Nick Saban retires. Greg Byrne hires Kalen DeBoer, a Jimmy Sexton client. So I don't really see that happening. The other thing is, why would he be upset about James Franklin getting fired? James Franklin got a $54 million buyout that he negotiated down to $9 million, and James Franklin has a new contract. But I have heard that is the rumor. That is why it's quote unquote supposedly tough for Penn State to hire a coach. I just think it goes back to what have we said from the beginning, is that there's too many jobs and not enough good candidates. And I'll be honest, with Penn State, I can't believe they let Bob Chesney get out of that area. Bob Chesney is from the state of Pennsylvania. Bob Chesney has coached in the state of Pennsylvania. I think it's preposterous. I know that's not the name you necessarily wanted. I think it's the name you should have gone after. But, I've seen that rumor. I can't corroborate it. And it just feels like a weird thing that the two of them couldn't get over. But I'll tell you this, man, they better hire somebody big and somebody fast, because that fan base is not happy right now. And the other thing, too, really quickly with Penn State, I don't know if they were too slow to move on to plan B, C, and D. Because, you look at it, right? Florida, plan A was Lane Kiffin. Pivoted really quickly to John Summerall when they weren't going to get him. Auburn, John Summerall was plan A. Weren't going to get him, quickly pivoted to Alex Golesh. Alex Golesh was plan A at Arkansas, pivoted very quickly to Ryan Silverfield. And so I don't know if Penn State just didn't pivot quickly enough, but they better get somebody soon. All right, maybe one more if we have time. I really got to run here. Michael says, very much enjoy your channel. Woo Pig Suey, go Hogs. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, that's a great way to end the show. By the way, I'm sure Michael is an Arkansas basketball fan. If you're a Hoops fan, we're going to have plenty of coverage of the games here over the next couple days. Big Tuesday night, UConn at Kansas, Kentucky hosting North Carolina, Duke hosting Florida, and we're going to cover it all tomorrow on the show. We'll do a Wednesday show. For now, though, we got to go ahead and get out of here. If you're not subscribed to the Aaron Torres pod, make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you get your podcasts. It goes without saying, just the support is so appreciated. I can't even express to you how appreciated the support is. So make sure you're subscribed, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Also, make sure to rate and review the show if you're on Apple and Spotify. Hey, by the way, if you need tickets, maybe you're an Arkansas fan that wants to go to the Louisville game in basketball on Wednesday night. Maybe you're a Kentucky fan looking for last-minute tickets to Carolina tonight. SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. Thank you to Collie Puffs. That's CAULIPUFFS.com. ColliePuffs.com gets you 15% off any purchase, anytime, anywhere. And that's going to be it. Time for me to go. Thank you for your support. I'm going to get out. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, UF Head. Unblock me, bro. I'll be back Wednesday morning. Probably something going on in football, but we'll have plenty of basketball as well. This is the Aaron Torres Pod.